Okay, we are live with George Webb, reporter on the Potomac River. Am I correct there, Mr. Webb?
Yeah, you call me George, and yeah, Andy, you can hear the Potomac right over there. I moved a little bit away from it, but that's the Potomac. Yeah.
Word, yeah, definitely. Just getting into character there a little bit, George. But I got a lot to ask you today. But before I get into it, is there anything you want to say right off the bat, George?
No, I think you're doing a great job, Andy, and I'd like to broadcast this on my channel after you push it out to your folks live.
Oh, wow. Appreciate
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I'll send you the file right away.
Yeah, and then
Definitely.
I'll annotate it just so I like to annotate my talk so that people can see the proof right as I'm saying it, and they don't have to look it up later. So, but that would be the only thing I would ask.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's something I want to do in the future, but right now I'm just focused on getting as much out as I can. Yeah, but I definitely want to do something similar in the future. But yeah, just some names I want to ask you about because I think knowing the pieces on the board, I think really help people to understand the game that's being played. And there are many, but just a few. And whether or not they're related or not, you can expound on. But I got Adam Schiff, Tom Cotton, Fiona Hill to start. I don't know if you want to start with any of those.
Oh, those are all great. Well, I've had a channel for about 4 years, and I do research every day, and there's a whole bunch of researchers out there that then watch the summary of the research that I do, and then they add stuff. They add links and so forth. So over 4 years, you accumulate a lot of these names, like entities. You get a whole glossary full of them, a whole alphabet soup full of these names. So I think of these names different than most people do because I've seen so much research on these people. I'll say different things, and people say, well, that's not, Fiona Hill was the person who was at the Trump impeachment. And I'll say, well, no, I think of Fiona Hill as running this Russia working group that was taking military programs that were covert, that the United States government didn't want to be associated with, but still wanted to use. For instance, let's say chemical weapons in Libya or Syria, or let's say biological weapons in Libya or Syria or Sudan or Yemen or wherever they wanted to do this, in Africa or Haiti. So I think of people kind of through their metadata, if that makes sense, and not their New York Times headlines, being the person at the White House who was the mole.
Yeah, you talk about metadata a lot. I was going to ask you that too. Could you go into that? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, metadata is classically, what you and I talk about, if it was an email message, would be the body of the message. The metadata would be the time, would be the to and from, it would be the regarding, it would be all the router information that would establish you in Oregon and establish me in Cobb Island, Maryland.
You studied English, George, right?
I had an English major, but I was mainly business and computers.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I was gonna say it's like the who, what, where, when, right? And then that'll make you kind of figure out the why, maybe.
Yeah, the why is the hardest of the W's. I knew a channel, an entrepreneur was starting a channel, a news channel, and he said, we're going to leave out the why and just do those first four because nobody argues over those. The hardest one is the why. Yeah. And I focus all my time on the why. It's very, my brother was the journalism guy. He did a lot of stuff in journalism. People don't know that, but he was really accomplished in journalism. And I kind of just picked it up from him. I didn't have any training in journalism.
Oh, wow. And that's your older brother?
Yeah, I have 3 older brothers, and that's my next older brother who also was in the military in Panama, and he had a lot of experiences from the military. And so I've learned a lot from him. He worked at a lot of government agencies, so like NSA and different agencies, so as a contractor. So I learned a lot. He was very much in this Washington, D.C. World of, needing a clearance and all that stuff.
Yeah. And he's retired now?
I think he's still doing special projects for different health companies and stuff like that. I think I haven't talked to him recently, so I don't know. But
Wow.
usually health companies are really concerned about HIPAA and privacy, and he's a HIPAA expert.
Okay, cool. And what branch was he in, George?
He was in the Air Force, and I don't want to get too much into his background.
Sure. I'm just interested. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's going back to those players. You just Adam Schiff, Tom Cotton, Fiona Hill. Did you want to go deeper into the those guys a bit? Because I also wanted to ask too about Whitey Bulger and the Bidens.
Yeah. Okay. This is like going through the glossary. This of all this spin the wheel. I call these entities people, places, or things. And so Tom Cotton, let's take him on the wheel here. He is a member of the Intelligence Committee, a senior member in the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, SSCI. And he's the one who's saying China did it right now. He's the one who's saying it escaped from the Wuhan labs. And he's putting out these little breadcrumbs right now, trying to get everybody to say, hey, the Chinese did it. But in actual fact, it's speculation. We don't have any, hey, the door was open on October the 8th and they let the dogs out. We have metadata saying that, hey, all the cell phones were blocked off from that area and the roads were blocked around the Wuhan lab. But what
it was like 16 million, right?
The
phones?
Yeah, there's a huge number of people that live in Wuhan. And so we know that the area was blocked off on October 8th. But what that kind of throws the attention away from is this place where we do bioweapons in the United States, which is Fort Detrick, was shut down in August of 2019 before the games because of security events. So we know that there was something going on there. And the guy who ran the lab, a guy named Sina Bavari, ended up going into business with 4 different companies that ended up going into vaccines. Like the RNA vaccine that we're talking about, which is called Moderna, providing a key technology for the Moderna solution that we're talking about so much now. So that's how I look at this, is everyone's providing a piece of the puzzle. And they usually put the piece on the side of the board that they want you to go look at, the China side of the board, not the American side of the board. And I try to do the whole board.
Yeah, definitely. That makes sense. And I was going to ask you about these guys too. And I might have asked you last time too, but if things have changed as far as Israel and Russia, because they're not necessarily on the board, our board with China, but they're nearby and they're big players too. So what do you think about what they're thinking?
Yeah, so I agree with you wholeheartedly that Israel's been a big player in this. A lot of the Russians coming out that we call Russian spies actually migrated from Russia and Ukraine to Israel to work in the labs. You may have, in my series, I talk about the Negev, which is the desert that was sort of a wasteland in Israel. And Mark Rich was a key guy in dark weapons, bioweapons, chemical weapons, who helped develop that with Ben-Gurion, one of the founders of Israel. And they have, lo and behold, have just announced a new technology using what's known as terahertz waves for a 10-second inhaler, sort of like people with congestive lung,
you like the albuterol they inhale?
Yeah, just like one of those inhalers, and being able to see if they have coronavirus in 10 minutes using a little chip, a little photo-resistive chip that comes from the silicon conductor industry. But then by shining a light, basically a wave at it, everything, if you put an energy at it, resonates at certain frequencies. And they can tell between the 100 nanometers and the 140 nanometers, which is about the size of a virus. They can also tell, these nanoparticles. They're used to measuring these nanoparticles in that range. Well, guess what? The coronavirus virus is between 100 nanometers and 150 nanometers, and it resonates. So that was developed at Ben-Gurion University. It's something we've talked about a long time on our channel with going back to a guy named Eric Braverman for 4 years now almost. But that's...
And Mark Rich, is he related to Seth Rich?
A lot of speculation about that. Mark Rich needed to put someone into Omaha, Nebraska, because that's where the only command that doesn't have direct oversight by the President of the United States, because of nuclear war. They have to, if the president is killed, they have to have a whole bunch of protocols called continuity of government. So there's a whole bunch of speculation that Mark Rich was Mossad and Seth Rich was Mossad, and he was put into Omaha for that reason. That's all speculation. I never was able to prove that one way or the other. But there definitely is a connection to Warren Buffett and a lot of these weapons programs that basically it's sort of like, we don't want this coming back on us in the DOD. If we're going to try an experiment and spray a whole bunch of people in Somalia, we want it to be somebody the Israelis worked with, the Pakistanis or the Quds Force in Iran, that helicopters that sprayed them. We don't want it coming back on us. We want the data. We don't want it coming back on us. So yeah, Mark Rich was definitely a dark weapons broker. He died in 2000, I want to say 10 or so. But the dark weapons business very much lives on with Adam Schiff. You mentioned Adam Schiff. And a lot of these Ukrainians that were being presented as being overthrowing or as whistleblowers, they were presented as whistleblowers. They're also involved in these dark weapons. So Parnas, Lev Parnas, and I can't remember the other guy's name right now. But yeah, I think of Adam Schiff as running a spy ring in Ukraine. I don't think of him as a House Majority Leader, a Senate, or a House Intelligence Committee chairman.
Yeah. Did Israel steal the atom bomb?
I don't know if I don't know if they stole it or not, but definitely there was some back dealings by Kissinger and Dulles, and also the second in command, which was Angleton, James Angleton. Angleton was cutting fig trees outside of the reactor in Dimona to seeing what level of radiation there was, making sure that the reactor was the level of purification was high enough. The grade of uranium was weapons grade. So, and remember, Dimona had to be built completely in secret, covertly. So yes, Israel built probably over 100 nuclear weapons in Dimona with the help of, it's a well-documented story in Pittsburgh, and I won't go into all the players right now, but yes.
Yeah, you can. Yeah. The short of it's totally fine, George.
That's the summary.
Yeah, definitely. And this is kind of a philosophical or a trade question, but how do you know if a source is trustworthy?
Well, you never do. I usually give sources who won't give me their name because in Watergate there was the deep throat, after the movie. So
yeah,
I was
Mark Felt, right?
Yeah, Mark Felt. So I give people the name of before they come forward, as Deep Blackberry, who was telling me about the NATO encrypted Blackberries being used on Capitol Hill. What are they hiding? What's the secret?
Yeah.
Or whatever. Until they are comfortable coming forward, that person later got outed.
By their peers or something?
Well, by somebody on YouTube. I had a guy named Deep Uranium who was talking a lot about the uranium rat lines for getting Iran a nuclear program through Pakistan as a proxy. And so his name was Deep Uranium until somebody outed him as Marshall Oki Richards, and it turned out he was an FBI informant, which I didn't know.
Your source was?
Yeah, he was an FBI informant who had tried to do bomb making classes in West Virginia for the militia group of West Virginia. I can't remember what their name was.
Like the local militia?
Yeah, it was kind of like the militia of West Virginia, and it wasn't an official like governor's militia. It was just
I got you. Yeah.
But he was trying to get him to go make bombs. So this was he worked for the FBI. So
isn't that a felony?
Yeah, but not if you're an FBI informant. Yeah, he was trying. He did put several people in jail. I found out later he put several people in jail for bomb making. So
Wow.
yeah, that was, and that's something that CNN never reported. CNN said I was going to Piketon, Ohio, and I shut down a port in South Carolina when I was going to try to find uranium in Ohio. Does that sound like I was trying to do something in South Carolina? And they never reported that the person who was dropping me breadcrumbs on the way to Ohio, on the way to the missing uranium. Oh, sorry about that. See how discombobulated I am? Just a second, Andy.
I always thought you were standing. I didn't know you were sitting, George.
Yeah. I guess that would be better. Okay, how's that?
No, you're good. I'm sitting too.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. You're cool.
Well, anyway, I think it's because I'm a little out of balance here. I wanted to make a level. I wanted to make this level so badly that I've gone overboard here.
No, you look aesthetic, George. No doubt.
Okay. All right. Well, anyway, that's the bottom line here is you never know. But it's more important that I think you put the information out than hold it back, because we're up against the deep state here. These are the bad guys, and they're going to hide everything, and they're going to lie about everything. Pretty much everything they've lied about. So you have the choice of either taking the information and telling people with the caveats, or just not presenting it at all. In that case, I mean, I had whistleblowers who were telling me their name, who said the uranium that was supposed to come here never got here. That's a pretty big deal. There was all these Ukrainians going back and forth to this very highly secure government facility in Piketon, Ohio. It looked like they were keeping everything there. It looked like they were keeping the bioweapons there, the chemical weapons there, all the stuff that Iran needed for uranium. It looked like a storehouse, basically, for this Les Wexner, and Jeff Epstein was his kind of logistics guy. And they were flying all this stuff out of Columbus Airport. So I was on that trail. So
you would say that Epstein did do weapons then?
Oh, absolutely. That was his thing. That's all.
What was his role in weapons? Was he just the middleman then, or?
Well, logistics. I mean, we went to the actual, Kalita Airlines, and we went to the actual, and I go on site for all these things. Went to the actual airfield and talked about all the CIA guys from Ohio State that were in on the deal with him. There was Cofer Black, and I can't remember all the names right off the bat, but yeah, absolutely.
Well, because that's interesting, George, because I listened to other interviews about Epstein, and nobody has ever said that. And somebody actually rejected that notion and said that he didn't do weapons. He was only trafficking, and he was only like in weapons in a very, very minor role. But you actually are saying he was actually had a pretty big role as far as moving weapons as well.
That's all he did. All the trafficking is. I'm sorry, I'm going to manual here.
Oh, you're good.
All he did was weapons, or insurgencies. So if he wanted to drop 50 guys with sniper rifles, infrared sniper rifles, remember, you can use robotics now. These robotics can fire chemical rounds. So there's these kinetic. It's Q on the beginning and Q on the end. QINETEQ. They're little launchers that can be driven from a cell phone. So it's a different warfare. It's called mech warfare, mechanized warfare. That's all he did. Everything you hear about him, well, and also scientists and so forth. His job was to compromise scientists and get scientists on board and get a very beautiful young girl as the assistant to the scientists, so that there was lots of opportunities to get into the laptop in the bedroom. Those are the two things that Jeff Epstein did.
Damn.
Now, Alan, I saw Alan Dershowitz on last night with Jason.
Yeah, I texted you about that.
Yeah, and thank you. And he was saying, hey, Jason kept asking about the In-N-Out burger and this burger that fell on the ground, and I said it's a nothing burger. They're making fun of you, Jason. The guy wrote an article just because he knew you would talk about this burger on the ground and how perfectly. But
is he love burgers or what?
Yeah, no, he's done like 12 shows on this burger on the ground. and how it was staged. I cannot. It's a nothing burger, Jason. But anyway, he denied all this. Jason mentioned, hey, you were a part of a signatory in 2011, I believe, with the Clinton Global Initiative, which was the way that they were rinsing the money through for all these wars, like covert wars like Libya and Syria. Jeff Epstein was right there in the beginning with the 1,100 Frank Juster partners, which are all these NATO generals and people from Stratcom and this cabal, like almost the Virginia company here,
Explain that, George, because people may not know what the Virginia company is. For example, myself, I don't think I've heard of that.
Oh, okay. Well, it's American history. It's John Smith and Pocahontas. You know that story.
Mm-hmm.
He came right up this way up here, right up this river, up the Potomac. And the Virginia company was down the Potomac a little bit, further down the Chesapeake Bay. But it was a bunch of people who were some Dutch, some German, some English, some Irish, but mostly English, who wanted to, hey, let's go get gold in America. Or if we can't get gold, let's get a whole bunch of slaves to do tobacco. So it's a corporation is what I'm saying. It's a whole bunch of people investing in a joint venture. And you're going to find when when it all finally comes out that Libya, Syria, Sudan, and Yemen were all part of a corporate offering by Frank Justra through the Clinton Foundation, the Clinton Global Initiative. And the way they got all the stuff they needed was they had people buy in. Bouchard provided the NATO jets, and Stavridis got all the Navy and cruise missiles for the attack on Libya, et cetera, et cetera. General
Are the Clintons untouchable?
Yeah, because they're front people. I mean, the Clintons are front people for the CIA and NATO.
Front people, you mean like the salesman kind of, or?
Yeah. It's like, the salesman really doesn't drive the car. He says the car does great things, and he might drive the car a little bit, but Bill Clinton is a damn good salesman at the end of the day. Hillary's a horrible salesperson. And that's why
they're quite the match, aren't they?
Yeah, if you believe that. But anyway, but they want Hillary in the worst way because Hillary pays out the biggest percentages. I mean, she takes the smallest take. She only takes 5%. Where Clinton, his fee for doing a war is 15. So they love Hillary because she takes such a small percentage. But if you don't win, it's all for naught. Yeah,
that's true. It's throwing it all in there. And I wanted to ask you about your daily routine, George. How do you so productive?
Well, I wake up in the middle of the night after dreaming about news for all the time I'm sleeping. I think I actually sleep about a minute or two. I wake up at about 3 o'clock. I usually go down for an hour or two and do tagging. I'm always trying to make things simpler and always trying to make things more visual. And then I'll go back to bed for an hour or two because I'm tired. And then I'll get up and work on reading all my messages.
What time do you go to bed for the first nap?
I probably go to bed about 10:30.
10:30 a.m. Okay.
No, when I go to sleep at night, 10:30 p.m. I'm
okay.
I've been up since 3 or 4 with a couple hours of naps, and I'm dead at 10:30.
Yeah. Okay. And then so you said after you take your nap, you wake up and then you start reading your emails?
Yeah, I do. I get a lot of people that are contributors that send me text messages. Emails are usually not as hot as text messages.
What do you mean by hot?
I mean, like someone will make an association. Like, for instance, I have a researcher named Harry the Greek who runs a blog called brassballs.blog. It's a really good blog.
I like the name.
Yeah, and he really digs, man. So he sends me an email saying, hey, you're right about Singapore. You're right about Singapore. I had said that there's a lot of health surveillance testing in Singapore, and there's a person who's a NATO courier who I cannot name, who's involved with a company called Singapore Statistics. Anyway, Harry says this new guy that Trump just named as the vaccine czar, and they change it to therapeutic czar, is a guy named Sly or Slay, but its name's it's Siliou, but Slayou or something like that.
Mm.
But he just got named by the DOD as the vaccine czar. And I had said we've been talking, Harry, and I had been saying this company, Moderna, that has this RNA thing. This has been out for they tried all this stuff back in Libya and Syria. And the idea is you vaccinate your guys and then you spray the enemy with the poison because you don't want to kill your guys. And I said, man,
contrails and chemtrails. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's more stuff to make people flip out. But
or how do they do it then? They do really low altitude then?
Yeah, drones or planes, and this is odorless, colorless.
Oh, okay. So like sarin?
Yeah, sarin is one of them. Yep. Sarin anthrax is another one. And this is much more. You're going to find that in the ISIS's drive to Baghdad in 77 days from all the way up in the corner by Aleppo was all helped by chemical weapons and drones and support people from this Task Force Orange here based out of Virginia. Because basically you fly over, odorless and colorless, they're all asleep. Then all you have to do is send in your insurgents to just shoot people in their sleep and collect weapons and round up women and children. And that's how they went to the doorstep of Baghdad in 78 days with the help of chemical weapons. So anyway, this guy with Moderna, right?
There's a lot to process.
Yeah, sorry, I don't mean to go.
No, wait. So based out of Virginia, they funded ISIS. Is that what you just said?
Yeah. Well, it's a spinoff. It's a very small group at Intelligence Command. It's called INSCOM. So it's a very small group. Part of Stratcom, used to be part of Stratcom. Now it's a part of Special Operations. But the group is called Task Force Orange. It's a part of Special Operations, very secretive group. They're the chemical weapons and biological weapons folks. So okay. I'm not talking about all the army as a part of ISIS. It's a very small group. But if you want an oil field, or if you want a uranium field, or if you want a field of tantalum that's used in making iPhones, very rare metals, rare earth metals, you could either have a big war and make the New York Times headlines, or you can have a very small group of insurgents that you can support with drones. And then, hey, they're the Superman that just seem to be taking all over Africa. And meanwhile, you're getting what you want, which is the minerals or the oil and gas.
Wow, that's the power of biological weapons, and that's pretty scary. Let's go back to Whitey Bulger and the Bidens.
Yeah, so there's Devin Archer. If you remember, Devin Archer there's three guys who get all the money from China. You always hear Trump talking about, the 1.5 billion that they get from China nuclear group. And then Whitey Bulger's brother, Billy Bulger, was the president of Amherst College in Massachusetts and a very corrupt politician. Anyway, his son, who's also named Billy, I believe, was in this company, this investment company with Devin Archer and Hunter Biden. Now, that's pretty crazy. But you say, well, how could that ever happen? Well, if I had a group that was, let's say, working with Raytheon and using chemical weapons developed in Massachusetts at an Air Force base near, I'm going to forget the name of the Air Force base, but it's where the Air Force lab is, where they develop these chemical weapons to be sprayed. I can't believe I'm I'm spacing in Framingham. It's the Air Force Base in Framingham. But it's a non-flying Air Force Base, but it's where they come up with these sprays.
Oh, Hanscom?
Hanscom, yes.
Hanscom? Yeah.
And that is, I need a guy. I don't want to have somebody from Hanscom Air Force Base drive out of Hanscom with a whole bunch of 10,000 gallon tank for ISIS to be sprayed, right? I need a criminal, Billy Bulger or somebody. I need a proxy, somebody to do the dirty work for me. So if I'm ever caught, I can say, oh, it was those guys. Devin Archer printed up a whole bunch of bonds for the Sioux Indian Nation. I can't remember what Indian nation it was with Jack Abramoff, but to fund all this stuff, it's just when all this starts coming out in the election, you're not going to believe it with this Rosemont Seneca stuff. Maybe it was the Seneca Indians. I can't remember which Indian tribe it is. Maybe it was the Sioux, but it was an Indian tribe that he used their bond printing capability to raise money to buy these weapons in order to keep it off the DoD books.
Wow, that's amazing, and I don't even know what to say about that. But let's move on to. I was watching more of your videos, George, and we can go back into the sarin gas and the Nazis in a second. But I wanted to ask about your ability to track IP addresses. Do you have a background in IT security? Oh, no. Shoot. Damn, bro. Mic check, mic check. Okay, can you guys hear me?
Now you unmuted my mic. Now you can hear me.
that was the worst.
Oh, no, it's okay. It's okay. I'll edit that out.
Okay, anyways.
So what was the question again? I'm sorry.
Yeah. I was saying we can go to the Nazis and sarin gas in a bit because we were heading that direction before I brought it back to the Whitey Bulger. But is Bernie a communist, George?
No. You asked me another question, and I was about to answer. It was a really good question.
Oh, excuse me. The IP addresses. How do you have that ability? Do you have a background in IT security?
Yes, I did network troubleshooting. So my brother is more the IT security, but I did intrusion detection and attack signatures and stuff like that for security. Obviously antivirus. I worked at Network Associates with Dmitry Alperovich, who's with the Atlantic Council now, and he's with CrowdStrike now. But I did network troubleshooting with Network General. So I know a lot about things that cause problems on networks and so forth. And the IP addresses that I quote, again, this is metadata. If somebody says, I went to the Wuhan Games and I was a cyclist, and that was the first time I was ever in China, and there was some IP traffic in Wuhan in October of 2019, I go, okay, you probably just took your laptop on the plane. But when I see them connecting to Nanjing, China, which is 1,000 miles away at least, and their connections go back to 2016, and their connections are Singapore statistics going to a health surveillance joint venture between Johns Hopkins University and the University of Nanjing, I say this person's lying to me for some reason. They're hiding the fact that they're in health surveillance. This is something that CNN didn't tell you, even though I told CNN. They chose not to tell you. So that's what the power of the metadata is, because, why are you not telling me this? Why are you not telling me that you're a NATO courier and that you're, what's to hide?
Yeah. And speaking of CNN, do they, if you do send them stuff, and I don't know how regularly you send them stuff. But do they publish your stuff, George?
Well, this one, they filmed it and they published it on national television, but they left the parts out that I said was supporting information to the story I was reporting. When I have a person who's not telling me the whole story, when their spouse is also involved with this Stratcom and Nav war in this aerial spraying, and also involved in collating all the dead bodies in Scott Air Force Base at Transcom, Transportation Command, for highly infectious diseases for the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. When they're hiding that, they work for the Supreme Allied Commander. You know, I told this all to CNN, right?
Yeah.
They suppressed all that. The only thing they wanted to say is this is an Army reservist. Well, that has nothing to do. I never accused her of being an Army reservist. So, you know, I mean, great, she's an Army reservist, but that has nothing to do with the IP traffic going to Nanjing. That has nothing to do with her being a NATO courier. That has nothing to do with her sharing a name with somebody who wrote the WHO plan for viruses and vaccines. And the guy, Giuseppe Benassi, ran covert ops at NATO. So he ran Ocean Shield. He ran all these covert ops. So, you know, they didn't bother telling you any of these things. That's the power, I think, of research, you know, and CNN wants to tell you a story about everyone on YouTube is a conspiracy theorist. It's just not true.
Yeah, they definitely like throwing that term around, but that's cool. I didn't know that they actually did publish some of your stuff, but obviously not necessarily the version that you want out. So Bernie's not a communist. Is Trump being controlled by someone?
Well, I look at the tea leaves, I look at the metadata and say this latest guy, this, I don't know how you say it, Sliao or Silao. He's a Moroccan guy, a French-speaking Moroccan who was called Dr. Vaccine. And he's now the vaccine czar. He just got named by Trump.
So what does that signify when you get that title?
He's going to have a project called Warp Speed, which is to develop a vaccine as fast as possible.
That's what Trump is calling it, right? Operation Warp Speed?
Right, Warp Speed. And I looked at that and I said, man, I lived in Princeton, New Jersey for a while, and I did a little bit of research on this dark weapons trade that David Petraeus was running. I was there in 2002. This is before he was director of the CIA. And the chemical weapons program at that time was being run through the Saudi intelligence. It moves around. Sometimes it's Saudi intelligence, sometimes it's Pakistani intelligence. But the big no-no is the CIA is not allowed to directly deal with the Iranian intelligence. Iranian intelligence is always the bad guys. So if we want to give Iran centrifuges, it has to go through either Pakistan or the Saudis. But usually Pakistan. So anyway.
No, continue.
Well, so I looked at this guy, and he this mRNA technology, this nanoparticle technology, has been out quite a while, and they've been measuring it quite a while, and so when I saw him at Moderna, because this company who is being pushed forward by Fauci and everybody, it seems like the whole Frank Juster partnership of 1,000 partners, this Virginia company that they have at the Clinton Foundation, seems to be behind this 100%. You know, they've decided Moderna is going to come up with a vaccine by the end of the year. Whether, you know, and I just heard Dr. Sanjay Gupta at CNN say usually these things take a couple of years, at least 3 or 4 years, and he's right.
Yeah, he is.
They've been working on this for 8 years. They've had a lot of field trials. It's called warfare. And they have a lot of field surveillance. It's called Singapore statistics. Anyway, he's associated. This new guy. He's not only associated with Singapore statistics or Moderna. He's associated with this A-Star, which is this this Singapore company that does this battlefield surveillance. So So one of the benefits of using chemical weapons on a battlefield, it's like doing trials. It's like doing drug trials. Everyone, they don't know it. They're dead, but they don't know it. But they were a wonderful participant and provide wonderful data for a drug trial.
And all of this stems from the Nazis' trials on the Jews.
Yep.
Yeah, and their chemicals. And I remember reading about this one dude. I think he was American, Barrios or Barry or something like that. He made sarin gas, I think, but yeah, they were making like sarin gas, and not just that too, but like typhus and just natural pathogens too that they would find. They were testing on well, not just Jews, but whoever they had, Polish prisoners, Soviets.
Yeah, and the place you're talking about, I mean, they used Auschwitz, they used Dachau, they used Buchenwald, they used all of them, but most of them happened down in the south in this place called Pirna, Pirna, where a lot of the and this guy named Kurt Blome, BLOME, ended up taking his kind of concoctions and bringing them to our Fort Detrick. And a lot of these concoctions, what they did was they took these very strong killer drugs and then did what they call attenuate them, weaken them. So you could put a cocktail of drugs, these weakened, in any vaccine. So every time you push out a vaccine, this is what was discovered by Dr. Judy Mikovits, is I have a polio vaccine, but then there's 32 other little mini vaccines that are in there. And that's the way of doing drug testing against all of the bioweapons that you developed, right? She calls them XMRVs, retroviruses, these XM retroviruses.
Yeah.
So, but man, her career was destroyed when she did a paper on XMRVs. So,
yeah, and that interview she just did with Paul, that's probably the best one so far.
Yeah, for sure. That Paul Cottrell interview with her. What I tried to do, I did a summary of that, as you know. I did a 16-minute summary because
I watched it twice.
Yeah, a lot of people, when their lives are ruined, just like I had a similar situation, similar brief jailing, want to defend themselves. They want to tell their side of the story, and I think that's very important that she does that. And her book Plague lays that out, and I recommend everybody go buy that book Plague. It's only $2 on Kindle on Amazon. She does a new book called Plague of Corruption also. That's $15 or so on Kindle. But what I did is I took out all of her defense, which was about 2 hours, and I just presented her case for XMRVs. And when you hear how somebody who was actually there doing it, how they did it, and how easily it would be to taint it, you only need one little Nazi with, one little teacup to pour those 32 XMRVs in there. And you don't need to affect all the bloodlines that are being passed around to these hospitals. You only need to, every once in a while, intercept a courier going in between these labs. And that infects the cell line for now till forever.
Yeah.
Till eternity. And if you're the guy who knows actually what went in the concoction that got put in the witch's brew, you're going to be the one who comes up with a vaccine.
Yeah, that's so devious and kind of like genius in an evil way.
Yeah.
But wow, and you mentioned it too about like extending their legacy. So you think they would do that for another gain other than monetary, like a fame type of thing too, or
control. They don't want fame. They want control. They want control. The ultimate Nazi dream was a vaccine where we protect all of our people and everyone else dies. I mean, we keep enough around to be slaves, to make our whatever rockets or whatever, or submarine. But I mean, that's the name of the game, the ultimate bioweapon. And it's control. They don't mind if somebody else has the credit. But it's definitely their dream, and it doesn't need to be a lot of people's dream. That's the key here. I only need to intercept one biocourier going to one lab and have that thing being reproduced. It's genius in its deviousness, and it's also incredibly evil.
Yeah.
But I know for a fact that Kurt Blome brought his stuff here to Fort Detrick in Maryland. There's another guy named Eric Traub that also brought it. Some of the XRVs that are found, that Judy Mikovits found, were equine, horse-based
Yep,
XMRVs, which
also related to horses.
came directly from that lab, that Kurt Blome's lab, the Nazi lab. So there's a direct linkage, and she's going to be the big hero or the big person who's smeared, or if she's not been already, because I think she discovered the secret of history of how these people want to use warfare, the warfare usage of these bioweapons as their testing and their collection mechanism for developing the next round of vaccines.
Yeah, and I definitely want to read her book, Judy Mikovits's book. I'm gonna buy it, and I agree, George. I think other people should too. And going a little bit back to Epstein, you talked about him before in one of your videos I saw, George, about him working with Gates in Haiti. Could you explain that? Because I never heard about that.
Yeah. So I have a source. I don't want to be too specific, but he was Sandia National Laboratories. So let's call him Deep Sandia. Okay. And he told me, first of all, in the coronavirus, he said there's a lethal strain and a safe strain. And what he thinks was first deployed in Asia was a safe strain. And that's the strain that you want to be very highly communicable to your own people, and so that you develop antibodies of resistance. And then the lethal strain is when you get ready to douse the enemy, right?
And that's the one that's in Europe right now.
Right. And that was first tested in Lombardy, in Italy, probably.
What do we have in America right now?
I think a combination of both. I think that's the thing that's killing us so badly is the West Coast version is the safe strain.
Yeah.
And then there's the East Coast version that came from Europe that's
from
into New York and so forth.
Yeah. And that would make sense geographically. And what's it like there as far as opening businesses up? Because Oregon has just slowly started to open up some businesses.
Yeah, the governor is making it, the guidelines, the presidential guidelines of it's got to go down for 2 weeks. And then that's the governor's guidelines. And then the governors say, okay, each county here in Maryland can vote. So here in Charles County, they voted not to have small gatherings yet, the phase 1, but delay it 2 weeks. But if I pointed across the river to that county right over there, they voted to open up. So you can have small gatherings of 10 across the river here.
So you can do a party over there if you need to, George.
And I can look right where my sailboat's going to go. That's where it's going to go. So it's only 2 more weeks. But it is hard to explain to small business owners why Lowe's and Walmart and Home Depot are open, but they can't be open.
Yeah, and all the liquor stores too.
Yeah, and the liquor stores, but
it's something out of 1984. Huh? You only can go buy your pills and your medicine, but you can't go buy a book.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty. I never thought of it that way. That's actually pretty good.
Yeah. I've only read that book once, but I don't know. For me, it was sad more than anything, especially the ending. But I definitely recommend people go read that book. What is the best and worst way to use a FOIA, George? If you're going to be an investigator, you probably want to use a FOIA at some point. Yeah. Yeah, and I
FOIA'd myself, and I FOIA'd some other things. The best way to use a FOIA, the worst way is to do a general statement. Like I want to Hillary Clinton and Libya. You're going to get a lot of stuff that doesn't come back. Judicial Watch is kind of the leader in this FOIA business. But I would recommend for investigative journalists, your own name or a name that's spelled out, including the initial. So we had one guy work here on the island named Thomas F. O'Loughlin. So if you put the F in there and the period, you'll get a lot more hits because there's a lot of Thomas O'Loughlin's out there. And we got it back, and we got his file, and he was the guy who, he was at the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the FBI was asking him, hey, do you know anything about this guy named Lee Harvey Oswald and this guy named Jack Ruby? Which is really a cool hit that you get when you do the specific searches. So that's why we do so much open source research, because you want to make sure when you get to the end of the road, your FOIA is as specific as possible, and you almost want to know that it's there before you even ask the question, because they're going to make it as hard as possible to respond to your FOIA.
Why are they going to make it as hard as possible, George?
Oh, just because they want to hide all their stuff. The government wants to hide everything they do. You know, I lived through Vietnam. You weren't even born yet.
No.
But if you lived through Vietnam, if I told somebody from the Vietnam area that the government lied to you, they'd say, and the sun's coming up tomorrow. I mean, got any other great predictions? You know, I mean, you were lied to every day about Vietnam. But now, you know, through since the Gulf War, especially, they've done so much work in terms of developing cover stories and heroes and all this sort of thing, hero worship, that you'll see a story about, you know, some bomb sniffing dog that got blown up, and I've interviewed people who had bomb sniffing dogs blown up and so forth. So I'm not saying that's not a great story, but the real fact is we're spraying people with chemical weapons or having a proxy do it. We train the proxy and the proxy does it. And that's a story that needs to be told too. And they'll do anything they can. Operation names are important. If I say Operation Odyssey was David Petraeus' 7-country takeover, starting with Operation Zero Footprint, moving on to Timber Sycamore, and then on to 7 other operations. If you can Google for that, you're a lot better chance of getting something, a hit, if you will, that's meaningful. Because a lot of times they'll say, look, your search terms are too general. It's going to cost you $300,000 to do that search. Do you still want to do this search? So it's also cheaper to make a more specific FOIA request.
Wow, a lot of great info there, George. And so say I've never done one before. I would just be like, oh, I want to FOIA myself and make sure I put, make sure it's my name, right? So it's really specific, and just start from there and then learn how to do it from there. And it's going to be real cheap that way too, because it's just you.
Yeah, you can go out to an investigative service called Muckrock, MUCK, ROCK.
Muckrock. Okay. Muckrock. It's a play on muckrake, yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, it is. And you can go out and put your name in and literally just check the boxes. DHS, FBI, CIA, Oregon State Police, bling, bling, bling. Check them all and submit it. And it's like they charge you like $15 per request. You can do that today.
Nice.
And you should check your own.
Yeah, for sure.
The first thing you should query is yourself, because you may be surprised that there's an FBI file on you. And then what you'll get back is these exceptions. So if they have a file on you, first of all, if they don't have a file on you, they'll say no records, relevant records found. But if they do have a file on you, they'll come back at you with an exception, going, you're a 8F exception or a 4F exception or whatever. And that's basically their way of not telling you that they've got a file on you. And I think I was an 8F exception, which is national security. So
what does that mean? They're not.
It means they have a file on me. It means they have a file on me, but they're not going to tell me what it is because it's a matter of national security.
Oh,
so yeah,
that's interesting. But that's not very common, is it?
It's more common than you think. I would say there's about at least 3 million people in the United States with a file. Remember,
so
it's
that's like 1%, right?
Yeah. If you've attended a protest, let's say that, well, just a protest in general, and you facial recognition, chances are you're in the file. Not that
it doesn't even matter what the protest would be for.
Well, typically political. And combined with your social media, remember there's 300 million of those profiles at NSA.
Yeah.
So if you've ever said anything like with an F-bomb in it, they could call that an intensifier, and that can up your risk score, and then that can kick you into a watch list. It's very numerically driven. There's not a lot of, a guy with green eye shades going through your file, because they don't have that kind of manpower, but it's very automated.
Too many people.
Yeah, too many people.
Yeah.
When it finally gets down to an agent, if an agent wants to do a pull on you and pull your data down, then that's when the shenanigans start, when they're going to start getting operatives involved and informants involved and open a case on you. But that's very few compared to how many other files they have.
Yeah. And why are there so many of informants in the US? Because aren't there like way more informants than there are like actual like police officers or
oh yeah
government workers? Yeah, why is that? I don't understand that.
Well, if you look at it from not a policing point of view, but a control point of view, let's say you're running, your idea is, hey, this is our company. So forget about the idea. We run A-Star. We're running A-Star. We're going to do topples, and we're going to take all the money. We're going to do a whole bunch of bank robberies, knock over these countries. Okay, so that's our thing, right? We don't want a lot of political trouble. We want to be in control of putting people on both sides of the aisle to run for an office that we know are beholden to us, that'll vote for our budgets, for our national defense authorization, right? We don't want we don't want the topic of discussion to be about us. Informants are dirt cheap. If you think about it, we can give somebody a government job that doesn't cost us anything. All we need to do is just basically come around at the end of the month and ask, what happened? Here, give me your file. Give me your email. Or with a pack of cigarettes, if you were talking about street informants, I could get an informant for a pack of cigarettes. I didn't have to pay anything for that homeless guy to sleep in front of the 7-Eleven. I just give him a pack of cigarettes and ask him, did this guy come in here last night? So informants are cheap, and they're the best way of maintaining political control. A secretary is the classic informant, or the personal assistant, because
the Martin Bormann.
I get all the files. Let's say I have one Microsoft expert running the database for the Office database for SharePoint. That's all I need for the whole office. And then she's already making money at that, or he is making money at that company already. I just pay him I just pay him a little supplement at the end of the month. We have some kind of club, and they come to meet the club, and I give out a goodie of some kind, baseball tickets or whatever. Just perks. I don't want to give money. I don't want receipts. But
okay.
But FBI gives out tickets to baseball games all the time to informants, basketball games, football games, soccer. This is their number one stock and trade, because they don't want footprints. Right. But the best kind of informant is one who's under the gun. If you get busted, or let's say some person gets busted for drugs, I go to the person and I say, look, if you want to help me catch another drug dealer, great. You're not going to jail. You're going to be an informant. You just do what we tell you, and we call you. We want you to answer our questions. Now I have the whole prison population of the United States, both federal, state, and local, as informants. People talk about these sealed indictments right now. I don't know if you ever follow the Q thing and everything on all these sealed indictments.
Like QAnon, is that you're referring to?
Yeah, there's like 200,000 sealed indictments. It keeps going up. But I know that these are the informants. The informant network has got leaks in it. So
what are those sealed indictments about?
Well, let's say I catch you, buying pot, I can't remember if it was Washington was legal before Oregon,
right? I can't remember either.
Yeah, but let's say I got
Texas, say.
Okay, yeah, and I can hold this over your head as a felony, right? Now you're going to do anything that I ask, in order to do future entrapments on people, right? So I seal your indictment. If I really want to convince you that the hammer's about ready to come down, I go ahead and go to a magistrate judge, and I go ahead and get the order to take you to jail. Because if you're not cooperating with me, and I say, look, here's the guys outside are ready to take you to jail. Do you want to sign this agreement or don't you? If you sign the agreement as an informant, I seal your indictment. I don't throw your indictment away. I keep the judge's thing, but now I seal it so you can't find that out as a reporter. It just shows up as a sealed indictment.
Oh, okay, so that's the reason there's so many sealed indictments, because there's so many informants.
That's right. So many people that are drug convictions that have been used as informants that they didn't go out they didn't bother going out to a magistrate judge because everything was working just fine. But if there's a leak and then somebody finds out about how the system actually works and they don't know where the leak is, a way of convincing you and telling you, hey, you better not be the guy who gives these reporters this information. We're going to go to the trouble now of going to a judge and getting a 5-year indictment against you. Right?
Yeah.
You're going to jail. I can pick up the phone and you're going to jail unless I get cooperation today, right now. And this whole world of informants is very intimidation oriented. That's just how they do it, only worse.
Yeah.
So it's not a fun story.
It's so interesting because it makes me look at the drug war in another way too, because it's like not only do they have the level of control and benefit to themselves in the drug war in the form of money, but also social control through getting all these drug offenses, these low-level drug offenses into the prison system. So it's like they can use both of those to control, the population.
Yeah, I would say 90% of the street drugs are provided on the auspices of informants. El Chapo was certainly state-sponsored. They rolled up all the other. They had about 6 or 7 major cartels. They rolled those up. They're all going through El Chapo now. He's a government informant. You think he's in jail. He spends one day in jail. He just does a photo op. But then he does. When they Perp-Walk him, it's one day photo op. And most of the drugs in America is hey, we're trying to catch the big fish, and so we need to seed the market with all these drugs. And look what happens. The crack cocaine and fentanyl overdoses are just skyrocketing. So they got to do something. And so I think that we're going through a period now where they're cutting back on informants. A lot of informants are dying of COVID-19. Have you noticed? Go through the different people on the crime task forces in these different cities across America. And look at how many COVID-19 deaths there are. It's really incredible correlation.
Again, what do you think is the reason for that, George?
Because after 30 years, you know everything, and I don't need you as much as I need
you to go away.
a new kid on the block doesn't know any of the history. He doesn't know everywhere the bones are buried. Yeah. One of the first deaths, look at the first 3 deaths in Michigan, in Detroit. They were all on the drug task force. They're all cops on the drug task force. So I just, I don't want to be conspiratorial, but it just seemed like a lot of the old long-term informants seem to be especially susceptible to COVID-19.
Yeah, that's it's certainly something to think about, to put it euphemistically. So, talked about the Clintons. Do you have a recent purchase under $100 that was a favorite of yours?
Do you know the answer to that question?
Are you asking me, George?
Yeah. Are you saying, do you know the answer to the question you just asked?
No, I don't. I'm asking you. I don't know what you bought recently.
Okay. All right. Well, decking. We're redoing the deck. So I decking at Lowe's would be the purchase. My I'm a pretty simple person. I don't eat a lot of expensive stuff. I do like supporting the local restaurants, and this has been hard for this has been hard for the local economy and all the local
Yeah.
restaurants. You know, I do like it when I'm all done with my research at the end of the day. I do like to pop out a bottle of red wine. But that other than decking and wine, I don't know what it would be. Salad, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Is that that's you and your wife are decking or making the new deck?
A significant other, yeah.
Significant other. Okay. Awesome.
She wouldn't want to be called wife. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and then let me see what else we got here. Oh yeah, the Interpol European chief. Another who. I didn't get the name though. You know this person? Or the
Yeah.
former chief?
Yeah. Interpol. Okay, so I stayed with him in Belgium. I stayed with a police chief in a small town near the French-Belgian border. So I don't know the Interpol chief as well. But the police officer that I stayed with there, I went to some places that I was given an indication that were involved in diversion of NATO security money. So there was and I don't want to get these people in trouble. So
sure, yeah, whatever you're comfortable with, George.
Anyway, I'll just tell you where I went. So I won't say the town, but it was near the border of where Calais, where the ferry from England comes in.
You travel a lot, George?
Yeah, in the past, not now.
Yeah. What's some favorite spots you've been to? Because I love traveling too.
Oh, great! I don't have to answer the Europe question. Good. So I've been to Singapore, and so I went to this island in Singapore called Sentosa. And this was supposed to be where it's an island right next to Singapore, and Singapore was the basis of the West's bioweapons program because it had a large Chinese population, but also a large English-speaking population, and also a large Indian population, Mandarin Chinese, I believe. So if you wanted to launch a bioweapons campaign into China, this was the place to do it. And the Sentosa was rumored to be this biological mad scientist island. Okay. And I went there and they were doing a lot of stuff with different animals and doing a lot of testing. I found that to be very true. And it's a very Nazi-like place. So Singapore is now coming back into the story. So sometimes the travel helps you. I had been given this tip in this group had hosted Obama, and they had shown him this new speedboat out on the North Channel, out on the North Sea, and they had shown him this helicopter, how fast it flew to this place in Belgium called Stavertland or Divertland. It was a Trappist monastery where they made beer, and Obama had some beer there. Well, it also seemed to be involved in this drug network, kind of an underground drug network that Obama didn't know anything about, with using these Trappist breweries all across Europe. And the real reason they bought the stuff was so they could speed helicopter this thing to this boat, and so this boat could go to all these different European ports. So all this money was being misspent by NATO. It was actually all the money that was being spent for security that the U.S. was sending NATO was being used to effect kind of like a high-speed drug network. And so then I went to Oxford. I took the car actually of the policeman and went to Oxford and went near Porton Down, which is a chemical weapons and biological weapons maker in England. I never got as far as Porton Down, but I went to Andover, met a couple of people in Andover. So So I've been on this a long time, and I went to France, MONS, France, where SHAPE, the Supreme Allied Headquarters is, and looked at something Epstein was doing there with getting these girls in to be the girlfriends of these commanders on the side, mistresses and so forth. And
that was with Jean-Luc Bernard. Is that
I didn't know Jean-Luc at that time, and I never met him. But since then, I've met somebody who knows him quite well and said that absolutely this was what he was doing. And somebody who was a fashion photographer who at that time knew him well, with Jeffrey Epstein, and he was definitely recruiting these kids to use to compromise both European Parliament members in Brussels. And I went to the European Parliament on several visits after that. I also went to Strasbourg, where they also have kind of an operation, and found out that this is all to divert money to do the Libya invasion. It's to divert money to do the Syria invasion, to get them all to agree to these covert weapons deals that they normally wouldn't be a part of. It's sort of like a bunch of gangsters, compromising these generals so that they can get the generals to release either weapons or authorize attacks or whatever. It's all just a big criminal operation that Epstein was doing. So, but anyway, it's so funny because the whole story about Epstein is he's just doing this compromise for political control.
Yeah, sexual blackmail.
For money. And it's not that. It's to do takedowns of countries to get the money. It's like bank robbing. It's like Ocean's 11.
Yeah. So who is behind him? Mossad principally in the CIA?
Absolutely. I heard Alan Dershowitz say that Jeff Epstein wasn't Mossad.
Yeah, what do you think of Dershowitz?
Thank God I wasn't drinking soup or something. I would have spit it all over myself.
Yeah, that guy was. It reminds me of the Shakespeare quote: "Thou dost protest too much."
Oh yeah, I mean Jeff Epstein was definitely Mossad, and this Whitney Webb, another Webb. It's written quite a bit about this, and I went to Columbus, and
Are you related to her?
No.
Okay, because somebody said you were, and I was like, I'm not sure.
No, but maybe back, Henry II, go back enough, in English history, but she wrote all about this. Bob Fitrakis. I went to Columbus to interview Bob Fitrakis. We went to the airfield. I went to the place where they trained a lot of the pilots in Florida. Interviewed Dan Hopsker, who had written about a lot of the Saudi pilots that were doing a lot of this chemical and biological weapons trade. We went right to the tarmac. We went on the tarmac, in Florida, and
awesome.
We saw one congressman coming in. I can't remember his name right now, but he's coming in with a Learjet, twin-engine Learjet.
Which airfield was this at?
This is just south of Sarasota, and all of a sudden I'm blanking on the name. Venice field. It was where all the 9/11 hijackers trained. It was where the Nazis developed a lot of missiles there through a company called Vogt.
World War II.
After World War II, the paperclip Nazis, VOGHT. So it just had this long Nazi paperclip history.
Were they that good at science, the Germans, that far ahead, that we just had to make use of that?
Well, I'm half German, so I'm never saying the Germans aren't good at science. They definitely were the pioneers, and they definitely invested in this. And if you want to talk about the biological weapons now, looking all the way to AIDS and so forth, that goes all the way back to the German labs of the First World War. This guy named Duisberg, Duisberg, and he's funded a lot of the universities in the United States. The anthrax attacker, where the guy they blamed it on it, Ivans, He was a Duisburg scholar. Muhammad Atta, the guy who flew the planes, right, supposedly into the 9/11, he was a Duisburg scholar. Look no further than Duisburg scholars if you want to see people flying biological and chemical weapons around.
Wow, that's man, your knowledge of history is quite deep, George. I have to say. And another person I wanted to ask about, well, basically two people. But before I get to that, I wrote this about the WHO and Trump. So there's this big deal about the funding to and from the WHO. What is your opinion of that? Because I guess Trump stopped it, and now they're talking about maybe resuming funding.
Are you talking about the WHO? Oh yeah,
yeah. I said WHO, but not the band. Yeah, but
no,
WHO, World Health Organization. Yes,
I couldn't tell if you were saying WHO or coup, which would be about the same thing.
Yeah, is there a difference?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the original funders of the WHO, the guy who ran the biological weapons program of Japan, there's a guy named Ishii. I think it's Ishii, and a guy named Sasakawa, Sasakawa.
Oh wow!
Who originally funded the WHO, the World Health Organization.
Wow, I did not know that. I knew about a bit about the Nazi scientists, but I don't know much about the Japanese bioweapons during World War II. So yeah, if you could expound on that, George.
Yeah, it was called Unit 731. It was much more horrific in terms of that even the Nazis were doing to the Jews and the experiments. And Sasakawa was the guy, and he was the guy who was funding the WHO. And his the legacy here with the weapons programs, it got moved to Korea because all these scientists were trying to find a reason for being. These Japanese scientists that were in the bioweapons program, as well as the Germans. We had the atom bomb, so everybody was saying, hey, what do we need to keep Fort Detrick for? What do we need to keep the program for? And that's when the Korean War breaks out. That's when we engineered the Korean War, so all of a sudden we need a bioweapons program because the border is so close, it's only 40 miles, we can't drop an atom bomb because all the fallout's going to hit us. We need to develop bioweapons. And so ever since then, we've had this covert program in Singapore and Korea. And the key actors, if you remember the Moonies, they were funded by Ishii, this before you were born, but Ishii and Sasakawa. And then now we have this weird, wacky death cult called Shinchen Onshi, who makes up for over half of the people infected in South Korea with COVID-19.
Is that the Christian cult?
Yeah.
I remember reading about that, or somebody told me about that. Like, it must have been like 6 weeks ago now.
Yeah, and it's so strange. And they end up having a big branch in Wuhan. They had a big branch in Nanjing. Remember, the games are all over the place in Wuhan during the breakout. It's not just the last 9 days with the military. You also had the U.S. men's basketball team that loses to France. The U.S. men's basketball team loses to France. I'm talking about guys like,
Tony Parker's retired.
These are the NBA stars, though. We sent, our NBA stars, and a lot of them got sick. And then China also did poorly. The Chinese didn't even make the final 16 during the FIFA or FIBA games, which is unheard of, and it's being played in Beijing and caused an uproar there. Mm-hmm. And then the U.S. military basketball team, can think about this, the largest military in the world. We get beat by Lithuania. So you have the French team that's sick. You have the Belgian team, one of their top stars is sick. You have the Swedish team saying they're sick. The Italian team saying they're sick. They're all sick. Wouldn't it be the best place in the world to test a relatively safe strain of your bioweapon than on all the top military athletes of the world? And all you need is a couple of 100 comfort girls from the Shinchen Onshi, and hey, here I am. And I can assure you that they exchange breath. I'm not saying that they vectored it with Shin-Chen on Chi as the vector. I mean, all you need is a spray or whatever. But, you know, all the sickness goes back to October 2019. We have the French gold medalist in the pentathlon and her boyfriend, who's also on the Netherlands team, saying they got sick there. So I didn't just take a story out of thin air and say, oh, I'm going to just, you know, make up something about the I'm going to just find the NATO courier and blame it on her. The foreign minister of China, who was in the best position to know the most about the breakout with the health information. Remember, the United States only sends 2 people in January to do health surveillance. The Chinese have thousands of people doing this in October, November, and December. That person says it started with the U.S. team of the 172 people. Li Jian Zhou, Z-H-O-U. Now, I found out this person was a NATO courier. I found out their husband's a NATO courier. Her husband's involved in infectious diseases and surveillance. Found out she's involved in health surveillance. Found out she had the connection going back to 2016 to Nanjing. She worked for the Supreme Allied Commander, #1 at NATO. The #1 guy at NATO in terms of covert operations, Giuseppe Benassi, happened to share the last name. Virginia Benassi, who maybe or may not be his daughter, wrote the book on virus and vaccines for the World Health Organization and NATO, the R&D blueprint. This is the blueprint that you use at Moderna to say what fake viruses are you going to make. So there was a lot of, and I can't say the name of the person, but there was a lot of circumstantial evidence. And then I have 2 people, not 1, 2, at Fort Belvoir in Virginia, saying the team was tested when they came back, and these persons had the antibody. Now, that could be they were vaccinated before they went, or they were sick during the games. We don't know. We don't know. And I never said this person spread it. I just said this person tested positive for the vaccine.
Yeah, I'm not saying you did or didn't, George. I hope you don't feel like I'm interrogating you.
No. I'm responding to people who've accused me of saying she spread it.
Yeah,
I'm just saying that she tested positive for the vaccine.
Mm. Yeah, it's certainly all that circumstantial evidence. I mean, I don't think you can not say it's like a little bit suspicious, you know, like all that stuff like put together, you know, obviously it doesn't, you know, prove anything yet, but it certainly looks, you know, a little suspicious. I think nobody can really debate that. What are your view on masks, George? Are you so big that you send your peons to fetch your groceries, or your view on masks?
That's so funny. My big day is taking the dog for a walk. You know, I don't live a complicated life, especially now since I can't go to DC anymore. Hopefully that'll change, but or to the different military places. But masks, I think, are you know, a good idea. You know, in the operating room, they're you know, I went through all that with Joseph Lister and not, you know, infecting the patient, you know, when they're in that sort of situation. The transmissibility through aerosol, I don't know. You have to get pretty close. You'd have to be a Shin-Chen on Chi comfort girl to swap some spit with an NBA star, I think, before you really have good transmissibility. Just look at the transmissibility of AIDS. The #1 way, if I'm using AIDS as a or HIV as a bioweapon, is transfusions. 100%. If you get a transfusion from somebody who had AIDS or HIV, you're going to get HIV.
Yeah.
If there was direct contact, it was only like 60%. If it was some of these other ways, less. So again, my #1 best way to get maximum effectiveness is not through the air. It's through taking a blood supply that's already been tainted and then getting the labs of the world to reproduce that in the millions, right? And then in a vaccine, then I inject it into you in a vaccine, in a very attenuated vaccine, and now I know you have it.
Yeah, isn't it? But AIDS can't be transmitted through respiratory droplets, though, right? So that's different, isn't it?
Okay, HIV, the virus,
Excuse me,
used
HIV.
used to not be able to be. But if you look at the coronavirus and you look at the HIV inserts, there's 4 HIV inserts in the coronavirus. It now looks like maybe it is possible to transmit. Now, there's certain things that they've left out. It's sort of like sending the man to the moon in the space capsule to prove that you can before you put a man in it, before you put the payload. This is sort of what we've got here is the space capsule. Putting that, we can get the glycoprotein 120 to attach 20 times more effectively than before using the glycoprotein 120 from AIDS. The glycoprotein 41 is now much more effective in inserting the virus than coronavirus, right? So we've got that. The only thing we haven't done is loaded the protein with the mRNA that we want to put in there. And we can load anything in there, Ebola, whatever we want, whatever bioweapon we want to use. So this is sort of like the sneak preview of what could be happening with biowarfare. The generals call this the new high ground of warfare. Not me. The generals on all sides call this the new high ground of warfare.
Wow. So because of that adaptability and that analogy you use of that, that first capsule or sending, what was it, the dog or the monkey to the moon?
Yeah.
You could make HIV as transmissible as the flu.
Yeah, through the air. Yeah, because
that is so scary.
Yeah, you've made the S protein. There's, you've seen the pictures of coronavirus, and the S protein is the little red protrusion. They've made the affinity of that 20 times more effective.
Yeah.
Through this glycoprotein 120. So, and the getting attached, it's sort of like, think of it like a mosquito. The mosquito first has to land on you. You've improved the mosquito's ability to land on you times 20. Yeah. Now the mosquito needs to penetrate the skin to inject, in this case, they're trying to draw the blood out, but it's the opposite process for a virus.
Yeah, they're trying
to glycoprotein 41 dramatically improves the ability to inject the virus. Now the only question is, what do you put inside the mosquito? What do you put inside the mosquito and that's your bioweapon of choice. With the mRNA, with this Moderna solution, I can send anything. I can blueprint any RNA that I want to make. I can make Ebola. I can make whatever I want. So that's the scary part of this. And what people don't understand with this whole Moderna thing is this is bioweapons 100%. This has nothing to do with anything that ever happened naturally. It's a nanoparticle capsule, and it's an engineered, CRISPRed RNA that goes inside of it. Nothing natural about this at all.
Did you know that from the beginning, George, or was there like a transition period where you're like, I'm not sure yet, and then?
Oh, you mean with Moderna? I mean,
mRNA. With the bioweapon. Like at first, were you like, yeah, maybe it's zoonotic, I'm not really sure, or right away were you like, I'm pretty sure this is bioweapon?
When I read the paper from India about uncanny similarities, it's called Uncanny Similarities, I looked at it and said, oh my God, And this also, there's a way of disguising what you put into something, because you don't want to make it obvious. Let's say I had 4 sequences, and these are the 4 sequences from AIDS to make glycoprotein 120. If I put all 4 in directly, and it's all one contiguous, message, it's fairly easy for this tool called BLAST. These researchers, it's like querying, it's like a Google for the thing. You just put in that sequence, and it comes back and says, oh yeah, it's here. What you do is you can separate it into 4 separate sections. It's almost like you were wanting to put something in a book, and you put some in chapter 1 and some in chapter 2 and some in chapter 3 and some in chapter 4. Then they have a thing called a chaperone protein, which will take the 4 separate and then bring them all together.
this GAG protein. That's also in there from HIV, right? So it doesn't matter. That's a way of disguising it. You can have, this could be where Dr. Judy Mikovits hasn't thought about this yet, but all of her XMRVs could be scattered like this. But when it comes time to create the virus for sending on and turning it into what they call an exosome and making replication, all these four things are brought together, and so that they can be read all contiguously to make the bad stuff. So I need to talk to her more about it, but I'm thinking that's the way this was done.
Are you gonna talk to her at some point, George?
Yeah, I will talk to her. I'm talking to her right now through Paul Cottrell, and I wanted him to have the first crack at interviewing her because I want to come in on the science level and cover things he might not have covered. And I'm getting there, and I want to read her book first.
Yeah, I want to get to that too.
Yeah, and you would be a great interview for her too, Addy, because you would have the benefit of seeing all these previous interviews, so you could ask the marginal new thing.
I mean, I would love to have that opportunity. Hopefully she has some time in her schedule, because she is the hottest author on the planet right now.
yeah, she is.
She's the talk of the town.
There's a big secret here, and we're going to find it. This is going to be a big thing. It's going to tell not only the story of COVID-19, but it's going to be the story of a whole lot of diseases like chronic fatigue syndrome and many others that people have suffered from. And from these vaccines, I'm all for vaccines. I'm all for safe vaccines. But if you leave a whole bunch of things that are not purified, and she even outlined a system that would intercept these things called CERUS, CERUS, CERUS Intercept, that would intercept all these things. And they shot it down. They didn't want that. They wanted these things in there for some reason. When she looked at the chronic fatigue patient population, 70% of them had these XMRVs when the standard control group only had 4 to 8%. So you know that this is if it's not a causal factor, it's a correlated factor. I mean, there's
a very highly correlative factor.
Yeah, you got to look at that when you see the correlations, man. You got to look at that. I'm not saying it's a causal factor, but man, and that was her point. She never said it was a causal factor. She just said, hey, there's high correlation. And in her science paper, that's what she said.
Yeah, and that documentary, I believe it's called Vaxxed. I still have yet to see that, but I'm going to watch it sometime within this next week because of this debate. And I just want to learn more about it. It seems like a staple in learning more about vaccinations. And I think I'm with you, George. I mean, I got some vaccines, but it was only like 3 or 4 that I can remember. And my parents were never about the yearly flu vax. They didn't believe in that for one reason or another, which I am grateful for. But yeah, just the safe vaccinations, and the ones you actually do need. But do you have private investigation experience, George? PI experience?
No.
No?
I have public investigation experience. All my investigations are available to the world. I put out a film every day of what I did that I think is significant. So there's a 4-year record out there. I've never done anything before that, other than there was a little bit of stuff with 9/11, and there was a little bit of stuff when Obama came in, but that wasn't driven by any government or any client paying me. Israel wasn't paying me any money or anything like that.
Okay, yeah, I was just wondering because you seem like you're skilled in this. Like I know you have been doing it a while, but I was just wondering because you have done other careers, so I was just gonna ask if that was one of them too. So, but I think that's I don't know, nearing up on most of my questions. I guess the big one. Oh wait, no, I got a quick one here. Is it Iran or Iran? Iran or Iran?
Oh, Iran is probably the proper way to say it, and I
Okay,
think
'cause someone said they want us to say Iran because they want to see like it's like a psyop because it apparently it used to be Iran. I don't know what you think about that idea, but
uh, yeah. Well, I mean, I think that there's this assistant that Debbie Wasserman Schultz had on Capitol Hill for about 15 years, and that they were the key conduit to completing what was called the Iran nuclear deal. And there was 150 billion dollars that was at stake, and they finally completed the deal. And then when the deal was over, they said, "Well, we got one more election for you to work on, and then you can go back home to Pakistan." So I believe that his whole time on Capitol Hill was to get the Iran nuclear deal and get to split the money that the Iranians had tied up, frozen. Jimmy Carter froze that money, if you remember, the Department of the Treasury after the Shah fell. And that I do believe Iran, whoever that viewer is very smart, because I do believe Iran is the secret of the spy ring in Congress for the last 15 years or 14 years, however long Imran was up there. Maybe they meant Imran. Maybe they were Imran, not Iran.
I actually that was one of my questions too. Emron one. Could you
Imran
explain?
Awan.
Yeah, could what is it called, George?
His name is Imran Awan. He was
Awan, okay.
the key advisor to Debbie Wasserman Schultz to get the Iran nuclear deal. You remember, you have to have somebody who's Farsi speaking. You have to have people on the other side negotiating back channel with the Iranians. He had a contact named Al-Attar that was Hezbollah, that was very much involved with all these leaders, Soleimani and Rouhani and all these guys. So you need a back channel, like we're on the diplomatic back channel here. You got to have people that are doing public meetings. But then for dark weapons, you can't say, well, where's the part of the agreement that talks about the dark weapons and the nuclear power plants and the bioweapons? And that's not in here. That's in a secret agreement. You need a diplomatic back channel for those things. And Imran Awan definitely was that back channel. Al-Attar was a part of that channel to Rouhani and to Soleimani, both the military leaders and the commercial leaders of the commercial nuclear people. So that's a good one to end it on right there.
Yeah. Thank you, George. I was just gonna say, is there anything else you wanted to ask people to check out or invite people to look at in terms of future work? I know you said you're doing your daily videos, but there's some people who don't know you are who are tuning in.
Yeah, I think this A-Star is going to be very interesting. It's the Science and Technology and Research group in Singapore and their connection to Moderna. They've been doing this battlefield surveillance for not Moderna as the latest kind of startup, but for this NATO cabal. And the connection to Singapore statistics and these vaccines are going to be rolling out, I think, going to be tremendously interesting. And this new vaccine czar's connection to A-Star and Singapore statistics is going to be very interesting. Because if you look at the history of Fauci, what he always does is finds out what's in the pipeline by the drug companies, and then he runs over and does private trials on animals, on prisoners, on soldiers, and then he compiles the evidence and the data so that he can get another investor involved, right? So it's an insider. It's like just like stock trading, inside trading, and illegal trials, right? That's the game here. So I want to know if this new czar is another Fauci or not. If he was running this inside game from doing battlefield surveillance across the top of Africa, I want to know. because he's just another Fauci. Then that's the number one thing I'm working on right now is this Silau, or however you say his name, the new czar. That would be the place to look.
Okay. That's thanks for that, George. It's a lot of info to unpack. I'm definitely going to rewatch this and add to my notes and yeah, just dive deeper into this stuff over the week. And hopefully next time we chat, we can talk a little bit more about the Midwest and what you think of Wisconsinites as well. But I just want to thank everybody for tuning in, and thanks for staying active in the live chat, guys. It makes it really really engaging. So I will put George's links in the description box below. If anybody wants to check those out, please go and subscribe to George Webb. Oh, congrats, George. By the way, you just hit 100K. I saw.
Yeah. It took me 4 years or 3.5 years. So how long will it be to 200,000? I hope it's not as long as it took me to get to 100,000.
Oh, I doubt it will be. You know, exponential growth. Yeah, it's the way it goes. So thanks, everyone, for tuning in. And if you want to just stick around for a sec, George, after in the lobby, that would be awesome.
Sure.
Cheers, everyone. And until next time.